Hello, today we're going to talk about the Fed's dilemma. They say they can't raise rates because they're not making progress towards their 2% inflation target. Now, the Fed wants there to be inflation. We'll get into why in a second. But if they want inflation, there's plenty of easier ways to get inflation than those they've already tried. So we're going to go through 7 ways to create price inflation. A few of them don't really work, and they've kind of tried some of them. Some of them might work, and then some definitely will work. So let's take a look at how we can help the Fed create consumer price inflation as measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We've come up with some ways we can make that inflation skyrocket. Now, the Fed says inflation is too low. And that's why they haven't raised rates for 10 years other than the quarter point that they raised at the end of December. Now, the core rate, which excludes food and energy because those prices are deemed to be too volatile to be included. Now, you still have to pay more for food and energy when those prices rise, but they don't use that as an accurate measure. So they use what's called the Consumer Price Index as measured by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, why does the Fed want inflation? It's based on this dumb idea that somehow inflation itself causes the economy to grow. And they're trying to generate growth through their monetary policy through inflation. Okay? Now, it's like if they see a car going down the road really fast and smoke is spewing out of the car, they wrongfully conclude that it's the smoke that's coming out of the car that's making the car go faster. So they think, oh, if we can only get our car to blow out that much smoke, then we're going to be in good shape. Our car will go faster, not realizing that maybe that car that was going fast would run better, faster, and longer without all that smoke. Inflation is a defect, not a feature in the economy, but the Fed doesn't get that. Higher inflation would obviously hurt the economy as people who are struggling, who haven't benefited from higher asset prices and haven't benefited from higher wages, would just have to pay more for goods and services. But the Fed believes that they've got to have their inflation, otherwise they can't raise rates. So let's go through some ways that they can create their inflation. Now, in order of likelihood of success, meaning that when we get to the bottom, that's the one that's going to be the most likely to be successful. So the first thing the Fed can do is print trillions of dollars and lower interest rates. But they've already done that. The Federal Reserve did 3 rounds of QE. They printed $4.5 trillion. They bought U.S. Treasury bonds. They bought mortgage-backed securities from the too-big-to-fail banks. And they haven't hit their inflation target. Now, you could say they could do more. They could, but it hasn't worked so far. They can also lower interest rates. They've already done that. Japan's put them negative. European country sovereign banks have put them negative. They still haven't created their desired inflation. But what it does do, it helps raise asset prices like stocks and real estate, because when interest rates are low, there's really no point in saving your money in a bank, so you have to toss it at stocks to get perhaps a better return. So rich people benefit from QE. They don't worry about their savings. They buy more houses and more stocks. They don't buy more food or consumer items enough to create some kind of shortage where then those consumer prices would rise. So your general consumer price inflation index stays low, but the prices of assets that rich people buy, like stocks and homes, goes higher. Another trick they can try, and they have kind of tried it, is raising the minimum wage. This one makes sense. You have higher wages. That would make goods and services more expensive to make. And with those higher producer costs, producers will raise prices. Bingo, higher inflation. Yes, but so far, the minimum wage law increases have only been implemented in selected states, selected municipalities and cities, so the impact on the overall CPI in the United States has been muted. And also, because raising the minimum wage doesn't necessarily get you either higher paid workers or higher prices, because employers often fire those workers, so they never get the benefit of the minimum wage, and they try to reduce their costs elsewhere rather than raising prices. So the first two haven't worked, probably won't work. Now remember, I don't want more inflation. I'm trying to help the Fed get their inflation. A third way is what's called helicopter money. This is Ben Bernanke's idea that if there's ever an issue, we have deflation in the economy, just print money and hand it out to everybody. Now, if the Fed prints money and distributes to the Americans, People supposedly will spend the additional cash. That causes a situation where you've got more dollars for the time being chasing the same amount of goods in production. That would cause prices to rise. But this approach is risky. What if the Americans don't spend it and maybe they save it or pay down their debt with that windfall? Now, the Fed's already noted and complained about Americans hoarding money. They feel they've done their job, and these Americans, they're saving a little bit too much. They need to go out and spend. So the Fed doesn't like the fact that they'd lose control if they just printed money and handed it to people and they got their unintended consequences of people not spending the money. Well, better for the Fed. If anyone's going to spend printed money, it might as well be them. Janet Yellen said last week that the Fed should consider buying different, broader range of assets. So why would the Fed encourage money to be handed out to Americans who might hoard it when the Fed knows better? They know where to spend it. They can buy stocks. They know which stocks to buy. They can buy corporate bonds. They can buy U.S. treasuries. They can buy foreign treasuries. They can buy student loan debt. They can buy whatever they want. This way they have control. So helicopter money probably won't work. Electronics may hold the key to higher inflation. One problem with electronics is they keep going down in price. Look at this chart here. You got the import price, semiconductor and other electronic component prices for industrialized country. For the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, they just keep going down. That's terrible. You can't get inflation if the price of electronics keeps going down. Well, here's some ideas. Make electronics more expensive. One thing you can do is create a silver shortage. Silver is an essential component in the production of electronics. Now, you got a little bit. There's not a lot in each unit, but if you raise the price 5, 10, 20 times for silver, that's going to impact the per unit cost of production of each electronics. And that'll be enough for the electronics manufacturer to pass along that cost to its consumers. Now, how do we get the price of silver to rise? Well, the U.S. government can do as it often did at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, just purchase silver directly from the mines and anywhere else they want to buy it from at a price they set much higher. Back in the late, when the United States had a large silver mining industry, they used to do it all the time. The senators from Nevada would lobby and get passed in Congress Silver Purchase Act, where they would buy silver just to boost the fortunes of the Nevada silver miners. Well, the United States can do the same thing. The U.S. also used to keep a strategic silver stockpile. They got rid of that in 1981. Well, what better time now to rebuild the silver stockpile? So the United States goes out, pays an above market price, or just the fact that they're in the market buying a lot of silver. The silver market is tiny. They drive the price of silver up. It hits there's a bit of a shortage. It hits the electronics manufacturers. They have to pay more, so we have to pay more. Hooray, we have inflation now because the electronics component of the CPI goes up, the rest of the CPI goes up. Now, absent government buying, the United States could also mandate that U.S. mines that produce silver or anything else, that because of global warming or environmental reasons, they should be closed. Well, that would create a shortage, and they can convince a lot of other nations to do the same thing. You know, we can't have this climate change going on. It's a bigger threat than anything else we've ever faced. So what if people have to pay a little more for electronics or things that have silver in them? Well worth it. Now, another one, the fifth one they can do is they can mandate purchases of certain items that are included in the Consumer Price Index basket. Remember, Obamacare did a great job of making health insurance more expensive. Why? Because you had to buy it. Government could require that each individual in every household with a net income over a certain amount purchase certain authorized electronics like phones and computers. The government can provide mandated electronics to those under a certain income for free and subsidize purchases of these mandated electronics for those that are not too rich and not too poor. Now remember, when the government gets involved or they subsidize anything, prices go up. So now, coupled with higher silver prices and already higher electronic prices, the government makes you buy these electronics and subsidizes them. Well, now you've got a built-in buyer. The demand for electronics goes up, the price goes up, the CPI goes up. An even easier way would be slap a tariff or tax on Chinese goods. 70% of the U.S. economy is consumer spending. Since the bulk of consumer spending in the United States is focused on Chinese products, You either put a tariff on Chinese imports coming in, or even easier, a domestic tax at the point of sale on Chinese products. That would immediately create whatever percentage increase you want. You do the calculation, what percent of goods are bought in the United States that are Chinese on a dollar basis, and you slap the tax on that amount to make sure that you get your desired inflation target. The last thing and the easiest way to get to the desired inflation target is do nothing. All the BLS has to do is just change how inflation is measured. They can do different calculations. They can come up with another way, and they can just say, we met it. Inflation is now 2%. In fact, it has been 2%. In fact, it's really 3%. So now the Fed can go ahead and raise rates. They see it's that easy. Well, then why don't they do it? Well, the reason they don't do it is the Fed doesn't hit these inflation targets because they don't want to. In fact, if they did hit the inflation target, they just raise it higher and say, well, we meant it as a threshold. It's not we don't automatically have to raise rates when we hit it. They don't want to hit their inflation target. They don't want to raise rates. Low, no negative interest rates support the upper end of the economy of people that are rich, and allows governments to finance massive deficits without significant interest payments. And in fact, at negative interest payments, they make a little money on borrowing money. So why would they want to mess that up? I don't expect the Fed or the government or anyone to take these suggestions seriously, but then I don't take the suggestion that we need higher inflation seriously either. Thank you.